Welcome to this video, and in this particular video we are going to take a step forward with our JavaScript series. Okay, so this is the entire playlist where I'm covering JavaScript from scratch. Okay, and we are learning everything that you need to know when working with JavaScript. So JavaScript is very important if you're building full stack applications. Okay, you need to have a solid foundation. So that's where JavaScript comes in, because when you start learning things like React, these are all JavaScript based. So it's good to know JavaScript also if you are into backend development as well. All right. Now, if you have not followed or watched the older videos, okay, be sure to watch them. Okay, I've numbered them as well for your convenience. And what are we covering in this video? So we are covering how you can work with APIs. Now, when you're building applications, it's obvious that you're going to interact with the backend, right? And this is where APIs come into picture. So we are going to discover how you can work with JSON data, how you can iterate or make use of JSON data. Now, JSON data is basically the standard. JSON is standard in which the APIs respond these days, right? And yeah, that is what we are going to learn, how you can make use of JSON data. We are going to learn about the fetch API. Now, fetch in JavaScript helps you make network calls. So we'll talk about how you can make use of it, why you should make use of it, things you should keep in mind, and everything. In fact, I'm also going to make use of an API and demonstrate it to you. Okay. Error handling in API requests. Now, of course, if you're doing network calls, there will be scenarios wherein you would face errors, or if you're doing API calls, there will be scenarios wherein you would face errors like unauthorization exception. For example, you're not authorized to access a particular API. So how do you handle that error? So all of that I'm going to discuss. Post request is also something that I'm going to cover. I'm also going to cover something called as Axios. Okay, so this is a library which is JavaScript based, and it offers a better way of making network calls. Okay, so you will see a lot of code being written using fetch API in JavaScript for network calls, as well as Axios is used at a lot of places. So I'm covering both, okay, and depending on the scenario, you can, or depending on your project, what is being used, you have the ability to work on either of these. Also, we won't just be doing talking, okay. It's important that we implement or put everything to practice that we have learned. So we are going to do a practice project called QuickPost. Okay, so this is an application where from where you can fetch all the posts that are being done by the users from a remote server and display it onto the web browser using JavaScript, of course. Okay, we are going to handle errors in this particular application. We are going to handle edge cases. We are going to build the delete functionality as to, like, if a user wants to delete a post, how would you delete? So it should also be deleted in the browser as well as on the server. So that all we are going to cover. We'll cover how you can create a new post. So if a new post is supposed to be created, you need to show a form, accept the data from the user, and then create it on your browser, as well as it should be displayed onto, so it should be displayed onto the browser, as well as the data should be saved onto the server. So all of that we're going to cover with this application. So this application will basically give you a hands-on learning or hands-on experience with whatever we have learned so far. Okay, so that is what is the intention of including this application over here. Okay, goes without saying, simple examples, like I always strive to keep examples as simple as possible so that students can pick it up really easily. Okay, and my lectures are super hands-on, so I don't make use of slides or anything. You must have noticed it's just the code, and I explain everything. All right, and I type in everything. So yeah, that's what we are going to uncover in this particular video. Be sure to follow this playlist, okay, and show some love because your love is what would motivate me to keep going, and it impacts my ability to bring in more such amazing free content on this particular platform. All right. Also, like, subscribe if you haven't done so, and comment and let me know whether you have enrolled into this course or not. All right. Without further ado, let's jump right in. So now it's time that we begin talking about what is JSON and how you can work with JSON data in JavaScript. Now, what is JSON? So JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. And what it is essentially just a data format in which data can be represented. Okay. So you can see over here, it's a lightweight data format commonly used for data exchange between client and the server. Okay. So it's a standard, and it's a standard because it's lightweight, right? So if you're working in programming, if you're working as a developer anywhere, it's unlikely that you've not heard, if it's very likely that you've heard of JSON, okay, and you must have also used it. Okay, now how do you work or make use of JSON in JavaScript? Okay, so that is what we are going to talk about. All right, so let me also show you what how the format looks like. Okay, so I'm going to paste a JSON format, okay, or a JSON data. You can see over here, this is what JSON format looks like. So it starts with curly braces. Okay, it ends with curly braces. You have key value pairs, which is name Alice, comma, age 30, city New York. Okay, now if I take the same data, okay, I can actually get it formatted and validated online. So there are several tools that do so. So on Google, if you search for JSON validator, you will come across this tool called JSONlint.com. Okay, so this is JSONlint.com, very popularly used and commonly used in in the programming world. I'll paste the data over here. You can see, I'll just zoom in a bit. Okay, I've pasted the data. Okay, and I'll say validate JSON. The moment I say validate JSON, you'll see the JSON is valid over here, and you'll also see it has formatted it into this format. Okay, so this is the JSON format. Okay, now what I would do is I would first create a string over here, because we are talking about how can you work with JSON data, right? So we'll first understand how you can parse JSON strings and convert it into JSON objects. Okay, so what I would do is I would have a string over here. I would have a variable. I'll call this JSON string over here, and I'll assign this entire thing, okay, to this particular variable. Okay, like so. Okay, so I have this JSON string assigned over here. Okay, now if I do console log over here, okay, if I say log, and if I print JSON string, okay, and if I come over to the console, you'll see that I'm getting this output. But this is not JSON. This is actually a string format, okay, which can be converted into JavaScript object, and you can make use of it. Okay, now to convert it into JavaScript object, what you can do is you can say let user object. Since this string is representing the user information, you can say over here JSON dot, I'll say parse. Okay, and then I'll parse in JSON string. So you can see the documentation also says that parse converts JavaScript object notation JSON into an object over here. Okay, so I get this, and then what I would do is I would make use of console log over here, and I would say JSON object over here, something like this. Oops, not JSON object, it's user object. I'll save this, and you'll see the format is different now. You can see it's JSON format, right? Now here we made use of JSON.parse to convert a string which had some JSON data, okay, from string format to the JavaScript object format. Now, like we converted the string to JSON, you also have a way wherein you can have JSON data. So I will copy this JSON data from here, okay, and I'll create a person object over here. Okay, I'll say person over here, okay, and I'll assign this over here. Okay, so this is person, and this is a JavaScript object actually. Okay, so one thing I'll mention over here, that JSON is based on JavaScript object syntax. Okay, so if you see, this is how you create object in JavaScript, right? And this is how JSON format is also represented. Okay, so it's native to JavaScript, and that is why working with JSON data is pretty easy in JavaScript. Okay, so I have this JavaScript object actually, okay, which has key value pairs information, or information in key value pairs. What I can do is I can actually do console log over here. Let me see. Let us do console log and see what we get as the output. I'll say person here, and you'll see we get this object. Okay, now what you can do is you can convert this to string. So how would you do that? So you can say JSON over here dot stringify. Okay, something like this, and you can see the tooltip over here. Okay, what does the tooltip say? Okay. Tooltip says converts JavaScript value to JSON string over here. You can see. If I save this, you'll see this is now a string as the output. Okay. So you should know how these conversions work. Okay. From object to that of string and from string to that of object and vice versa. All right. So these things you should understand, right? Because when you're working with APIs and when you're exchanging data between clients and server, it's really important that you understand what JSON is and how you can work with it. Because let's say if you're working with a server and it sends a data in the JSON format, let's say it sends the user object over here. Okay, we got this data from the server. Now we are printing it onto the console this way. Okay, we have got it converted into a native JavaScript object. Now how do you use it? Okay, so I can do console log over here. I'll show you. You can say user object dot. Okay, you have access to properties. You have age over here. You can print in the age. Age is 30. You can see. You can print in anything like name over here. You can see Alice over here. Okay, so this way, using the dot notation, you can access the properties after you have converted the data from string to the native JavaScript format. All right. So this thing makes your life a lot easier. And if you're working with APIs in JavaScript, you will see this line a lot, JSON.parse, because you will always be passing data that you get from the server. All right. So I hope this was useful and I hope you have been able to follow along. Now it's time that we begin talking about the Fetch API. Now what is Fetch API? Fetch API provides a way for us to make network requests in JavaScript. Okay, and it is also built into modern web browsers. So if you are making use of any sort of web browser like Firefox or Chrome, you don't need to add any sort of additional library or anything like that. It's inbuilt, right? And with the help of Fetch, you can make use of it to do network calls, which means like if you have a resource or any sort of file that is remotely located across the network, you can make use of it to do it, to get it. Okay, so this is what it means. It provides a easy way to make network requests in JavaScript. All right. And when you're making network requests, there will be multiple kinds of calls like get request, post request, put request. You can do all of that with Fetch. All right. Now, to simulate or to understand the working of Fetch, we will need a remote resource, right? So here, I would like to introduce you to a JSON placeholder. Okay, so this is a website that provides a dummy API over here. You can see it provides a dummy API for testing and prototyping, right? So the website URL is jasonplaceholder.typecode.com. So if you Google this, you should absolutely land on this website. And if you scroll down over here, okay, if you scroll down, you'll see multiple endpoints over here. You can see, right? If you click on this, you will see the JSON response. So this is the JSON data that this endpoint is receiving, right? So you can make use of this. We'll be making use of this to play around with the Fetch API. They also have this code over here, which is a dummy code. You can run this and it will run and it will give you the response over here. Okay, and it also has a message over here. It says run this code here in a console or from any website, right? It is going to execute. So it's querying the JSON placeholder.typecode.com. All right. What I will do is I'll simply copy this over here. Okay. And we can come over here, right? And you can paste it over here. Okay. You'll see the output. You can see. Okay. Or I can clear this. Okay. Or we'll clear it this way. Okay. I'll paste it over here. Okay, and if you save it over here, you'll see the same output that you saw when we pasted it onto the console. Now, let me break this down for you. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this first line itself. Okay, it's making use of the Fetch API over here, and we are going to break this down a bit. Okay, so what I would do is I would just have this first line. Okay, I'll add a semicolon in the end. Okay, and I would assign this output over here to a variable called a. Okay, so no output yet. Okay, because we are just fetching. We are just doing the fetch call, and we are assigning it to a over here. Right Now what this fetch returns, let us see what fetch returns. So fetch actually returns a promise over here. So you'll see this is a promise, right? So it returns a promise that resolves to a HTTP response, right? Because going to the server, fetching the data will take a bit of time. So what it does is it returns promise because it is representing a value that will exist in future. So what we can do is we can say a dot then over here, okay, and I would say response, okay, and here I'm going to return, I'm going to say response dot JSON. You can convert this into JSON over here, something like this, right? This is done. Now here you can chain one more then, okay, you can say then, okay, and you'll get data as the, let's accept the parameter as data over here. And what I would do over here is I would say console.log here, something like this, and I'll print in data, okay. So you'll get the similar response or the same response. So this is another way of doing things, okay, wherein we have broken down these steps, okay. So here we are chaining things in a single call, but here I'm actually making a fetch API call. We are seeing what this output has, okay, and we got to know that it's returning a promise. And then with the help of then over here, we are actually resolving the promise over here, right? So this is how it works. Now, this is a way to make use of fetch, okay. But what I would say is today, if you learn about fetch over here, you will see the syntax of async and await a lot being used with this, okay. So let me show that also to you, okay. So with the help of async and await, what you can do is you can make the call to the remote resource and you can get the response. So let me show that. I'll copy this line over here where we are making the call, okay. So this is the line, right? Now before this, I'm going to say await over here, okay. So this is by using await and async, all right. So I got the response, okay. I am saying await over here, and I'll say or I can say I can create a constant response over here, something like this. I have the response now, right? Now let me save this. I can do a console log. Let us do a log over here, okay, and let us see what this response has. So you will see this is a response object over here, okay. Now if you open this, okay, you'll see there are a lot of things like body, headers, okay. You have OK, which is true. So you can see OK is true. It means that the request was successful. Status is also 200, okay. You have the URL as well, okay. So all of this data you are getting over here, okay, in the response object. So if you want to see whether the request was successful or not, okay, what you can do is you can have a if condition over here and you can check for response dot OK over here, because OK is true. And if this request is not successful, for example, if I add 1 over here, if I make a URL like typo in the URL, you will see over here that we don't get response.ok. You can see, which means that the request has failed, right? So let me save this, okay. We have response.ok, and you can handle the success scenario over here, okay, whatever, in whichever way you want to handle, okay. So you can do that. Now I'll get rid of this, okay. But we get the response over here. Now what do we do with the response, okay? So one thing what we can do is we can convert this into JSON over here, something like this we can, okay. Now over here I'll say await again, and here I'll say const data, something like this, okay. So I have the data here, and I can say console log data, save it. So you'll have the same data, okay, with the minimal syntax, okay. So this syntax is much more simpler as compared to this one, okay. And if you Google or read about fetch anywhere, this is what will be used, okay. Now here we have just made of await, okay. If you are making use of any sort of function, you can make use of async as well, okay. So let me show that to you. So I'll say async, okay, async, and you can see function over here. I'll call this function as fetch data over here, okay, and I'll paste the code that I had, all right. So I have this code, it's making use of await, I get the response, and yeah, I am actually getting the data, and I'm printing the data. That is what I'm doing. And I can call this over here, fetch data, something like this, and I can save it. Okay, you'll get the same response. Okay, so I'm getting an error, fetch data is not defined. Okay, so it should be fetch data, something like this. So you'll get the response, you can see, right? So this is how you can make use of async and await to make API requests or make network requests using fetch over here. Now let's start talking about error handling when making network calls. It's evident that whenever you're making a network call, API request, there will be scenarios wherein you might face some errors. You might face network errors, or you might not receive the response, and so on. How do you handle them? Okay, so here what we will do is we'll develop this example further, and we'll do some sort of error handling over here. Okay, so what we can do over here is we'll handle for two scenarios. One is if the response is okay, and if the request was successful, and also if the response was not okay. Okay, so what I will do is, first thing first, one way of error handling when it comes to JavaScript or any major programming language is to have try-catch statement. So I'll have this try-catch block. I'll move this entire piece of code within a try-catch block. All right, so this is done. This is taken care of. Okay, now I have this response. Okay, now after I get the response, I'll have a check over here. I can say if response dot okay. So this is a boolean field in this object. I'll say if it's not equal to okay. All right, I'll say throw and new error, and I'll specify the message over here. I'll say network response was not okay, something like this. All right, this is taken care of. All right, I have this error that I'm custom error object or error object that I'm creating and I'm throwing. Okay, if I get the response and if this block is not executed, then what I will do is I will get the response as JSON, and I'm fetching the data over here. So I can actually fetch it this way. I can say fetched data, something like this. Okay, now if there is any error, thrown, what I can do is I can say console.error over here, and here I can say error, and I can just log the error, something like this. This is done, and you can see this is how it will work. Okay, let me make a mistake in the domain. Okay, all right, so it still got some response over here, but just in case we don't get any response, okay, then this thing will be executed. Okay, like we don't we encountered any sort of HTTP error, 404 error, so all of this will be handled by this particular code. And what we are doing is pretty simple. When we are getting the response, we are checking if response was okay or not, right? This is a boolean field that exists in the response object, and if it's not okay, then we are throwing the error, we are getting the data, and we are logging it onto the console. So you can do any sort of processing that you wish to do because of this, with this error handling mechanism. So that's about the error handling with the fetch API and also using async await. So far, what we've done is we have done the get request. Okay, whenever we are making use of fetch, we are doing a get request, and this is how you do a get request or when working with fetch API and a remote API. Okay, so there will be scenarios when working with APIs. Of course, you might want to do a post request as well, wherein you want to post something to the server. So to do a post request, this particular website also provides. So if you scroll down here, you can see this. So here you have this get request, and here you have this post request. Okay, so if you call this endpoint /post, and you can pass in any sort of data, okay, and you can do a post request. Essentially, you can go to guide over here and you can see, okay, so this is how a post request is done. Okay, you can make use of this example as well. Okay. But what I'm going to do is so you can take a look. This is actually the exact syntax that we are planning to use. You have method defined as post, body, okay, and you have headers. So along with the fetch, you're passing in one more parameter. So you can see this is one more parameter, and you're passing in different things like method, body, headers, and so on. Okay, and you're sending it to the server. Now let us come over here and let us simulate this. So right now what we are doing is we are actually having fetch data. Okay, what I'll do is I'll duplicate this over here. I'll just comment this fetch data. Okay, and I'll have a new method created, a new function. I'll call this as post data, something like this. Okay, and I'm sending the request to, so not to do's, I'll send a request to post. Okay, over here. All right, and so it's the same API call, but over here what I will do is I'll add a comma. Okay, and we'll pass in additional information along with this request. What is the additional request? By default, what is the additional information? By default, it's taking in get. I'll say method over here is equal to, and oh sorry, not is equal to, I'll say post, something like this. Okay, so I'm specifying the HTTP method. I'll also specify the headers over here, headers colon, and here I can have a list of headers in the form of key value pairs. Now one of the headers I can pass in is content hyphen type over here. Okay, and you can say application /JSON. All right, this is something that I'm passing, and over here in the body, so you can actually pass in the body as well. So in the body you can say body, and I can say colon, so colon, you can say JSON dot stringify. Okay, and you can have whatever you want to post to the server. Now here you can pass in a new post essentially, because we are creating a new post. Now new post does not exist, so you will have to create it. All right, and here you can come outside, you can say constant or new post, something like this, and you can have the data being populated. Okay, so I can say post related data is title. Okay, and I can say new post, something like this, and I can have a body of the post as post body. I'll just call it post body. Okay, and you can have user ID over here. Let's say you have a user ID in your application, you can say user ID is 1. I'm just adding dummy information. So this is how you will post the data. Okay, and the rest of the thing remains the same. Okay, so you are checking if the response is okay or not. Okay, response was not okay. You are getting the data over here. So after making this post call, you are getting a response object, which you are parsing it to JSON using await, and you're saying fetch data. So I won't say fetch data, I'll say posted data, right? And we are posting the error as well. Okay, now you can call this. So I'll say post data over here. Okay, and I'll save this. So now you can see over here. Okay, this data is what is posted. Okay, you can see body, ID, title, and user ID, right? So this is what we are posting to the server, and this is what we are getting as the response. All right, so yeah, this is how you post data. All right, and remember over here, what we are doing is we have this function declared as async over here. We are marking it as async so that we can make use of await within it. Okay, and fetch call is awaited to pause the function until the request completes, and then we are making use of await again over here to parse the response to JSON. All right, and I have error handling managed over here, error handling done over here with the help of try catch block. All right, so this is what we are doing, and this is how you can make use of or this is how you can make use of fetch to post data onto the server. I hope this is pretty much clear, and I hope this is starting to give you a sense of how powerful this fetch API is in JavaScript. So I want to talk about Axios, and if you're working with JavaScript, it's likely that you will hear a lot about this particular library. All right, now I'll come over to Google first. okay, and we'll talk about what Axios is, okay. But by definition, Axios is a simple promise-based HTTP client for browsers, and you can even make use of it using with Node.js, okay. So it's basically a very simple library, very simple but very powerful, and it's basically used for making network calls. So this is a website, axioshttp.com. Okay, if you search for Axios JavaScript, this is where you will land. It's likely that you will see a different interface depending on when you're watching this video, but let's go to get started. And here you will find everything that you need about Axios. So this is how you configure Axios if you're making use of HTML based application. And if you're making use of like something called as a node, you can make use of like if you're making use of npm package manager, and if you want to install it with node, you can make use of this. Okay, so these are different ways in which you can use Axios. Let's take a look at example. Now here, if you see, this is how a GET request works with Axios. Okay, so you can see you have GET method. You can make use of then because it's promise based, catch over here, and you have finally as well. Okay, you can do GET request as well as the post request. Okay, and let us take a look at examples for the same. Okay, I'm here. Okay, by definition, Axios is a powerful HTTP client for making network requests in JavaScript. Okay, there are two things. One is the GET method. You also have post method, which is used to make post requests. Okay, now we'll make use of dummy API over here. Okay, this is like JSON placeholder. Okay, and we'll try to get the data. We'll try to get the data in, like we'll try to do a GET request. Let's say I'll try to get one single post over here. So this is the endpoint that I'm going to use. Okay, this is what the response that I'll get. All right, so I'll get this. I'll take this endpoint and we'll make a GET request. Okay, how do you make a GET request? So you come over here. Okay, we have this endpoint. Okay, first of all, we need to add Axios. Okay, otherwise we are going to get errors. So I'll go to introduction over here. We had this script tag. So I'll copy this. Okay, I'll come over here and basically in index.html, I'll add the script tag over here, something like this. Okay, then I'll come over here. Okay, and I'm going to make use of get over here to get the data. Okay, so I can say Axios dot get. Okay, and let me cut this and paste it over here. Okay, so this is the endpoint that I'm making a call to. I'll say dot then, something like this. Okay, I'll have response. Okay, and I'll make use of arrow over here, and I'll say log, and we'll say get request over here. Get request. What is the output? So the output is response dot data over here. Okay, that is what we are going to do. So you can see the output over here. You can see user ID 1. Okay, the entire output that you saw over here in the endpoint. Okay, you can see, and this is what you'll see over here, right? So this is the data that we are getting. Okay, it's working perfectly fine. All right. You can even just print response. Let us see what this response object has. Okay, so if you see this response object, you have config. Okay, you have data over here, body, title, user ID. You can see the entire data over here in the JSON format. You have headers, you have request related information, you have status code, the status text, all of that you have. Now, if you want to get the data, just the data, you can make use of response.data over here. So this is get request using Axios. Okay, I'll end this with a semicolon. Let's take a look at the post request as well. So what I will do is I'll just duplicate this. Okay, we will tweak this syntax over here. Okay, so here what I'll do is I'll create post data first. Post data over here. Okay, something like this, and I'll have data like title over here. So I can say title post. Okay, and I'll have description, something like this, or let's have instead of description we can have a body over here as key value pairs. Okay, body post. Okay, that is it. So I'll have a couple of parameters here. This is our post data object. Okay, now what I can do over here is instead of get, I can make use of post over here. This is post, right? I have this endpoint over here. So actually, if you visit the website over here, okay, this is the endpoint where, so if I scroll down, this is the endpoint where the post request can be triggered, okay, /posts. So I'll just remove one from here. Okay, this is not needed. It should be posts, and I'll post the post data over here. Okay, so you can see the simplification in the syntax over here, right? And you can see this is, instead of get, this is post over here, and you can save this essentially. So you can see this is get, and here we are making use of post request, wherein we are getting the data that is posted. All right. So this is how post request works. Now you'll ask, okay, what is the difference? Why should I use Axios over Fetch? Fetch is also inbuilt. Okay, I don't need to make use of any sort of external library. Okay, now the answer lies in multiple things over here. So you must have observed, like, the syntax is pretty much concise. It's easier to read, easier to make use of. You have to make use of methods and you are done, right? Also, the response that you're getting over here when you're making use of Axios is JSON by default. You don't have to parse. But when you work with Fetch, you'll have to explicitly convert the data into JSON format, okay, using response.json, and that is when you get the JSON data. Okay, so it's an additional step that you have to do. Also, in terms of error handling, okay, you can make use of catch over here. Okay, so you can say over here dot catch. Okay, now you will get an error if there is any sort of errors. Okay, so I can say error, log over here, so log. Okay, and you can say error, and you can post the error object as well over here. Okay, so this needs to go away. Let me see. So yeah, this is what it is. Okay, so yeah, this is how you can catch the error. You can add this over here as well. So I'll add it. This is how you can catch errors. Okay. Now, when it comes to error handling, I must say that Axios provides better error handling mechanism. I must say better and informative. I'll tell you why. So when you work with Fetch API, errors will only be thrown if there is a network error, right? And HTTP status codes like 404 or 500 do not trigger a catch block. But with Axios, any HTTP status code outside the range of 2, like if it's 2xx, outside the range of, if it's not starting with 2, in short, it will automatically trigger an error that can be caught in the catch block, right? So these all kinds of benefits you have with Axios, and you will see a lot of code out there that is making use of this library. This library is pretty popular. Okay. Also, Fetch, it does not support Internet Explorer, whereas Axios is compatible with all major browsers, including older versions. So Axios, in a way, is a better choice if you need to support legacy browsers as well. Okay. So yeah, this is about Axios, and I hope this is helpful, and I hope you have been able to follow along. So I'm going to give you a quick demo of the application that we are going to build using JavaScript. So the application is called QuickPost, and this is what it will look like. Now here you can see that you have 2 input boxes, and from here you can create a post. Okay, so you can enter the title and the post content, and it is going to create a post for you. And when you say create post, it is going to post, or it's going to do a post request and create the post. So we'll have an API in place that is going to do the job. And all the data that you are seeing over here is post. These are all dummy posts that we are fetching. And this is all being fetched from a API. Okay. It has a remote delete button using which you can delete the post over here. Okay. So this is what the entire application is going to look like. Okay. And the question would come to you, like in your mind, is which is the API that we are going to use. So I'm going to make use of a dummy API from this website called jsonplaceholder.typicode.com. If you Google JSON placeholder, here's where you'll land, and it provides free demo APIs to be used in your application. So if you scroll down, you will have like APIs like endpoints over here. Okay, you can see all the routes, posts, you can get the comments and so on. Okay. So yeah, this is what we are going to use, and yeah, this is entirely API driven. Okay, so we are going to build functionalities like displaying the post. How can you display the post? How can you fetch the post from the remote server? How can you create a new post using this form at the top? How can you delete the post as well? So ready? Let's jump right in. So here I am in Visual Studio Code, and I have opened this folder where I'm going to write all the code. I have 3 files created: index.html, index.js, and style.css. Okay, so ignore this mat.js. We're going to work on these 3 files that are open over here: index.html, index.js, and style.css. They all reside in the same folder. Okay, so I'll start with the HTML file. Okay, I'm going to add some boilerplate code over here. Okay, and we'll add the document title as QuickPost because that is what our application is going to be called. Under body, I'm going to add a h1 tag over here, and I'm going to add QuickPost again over here. Okay, so if you head over to the browser and if you refresh, you're going to see QuickPost up here. Okay, so this is QuickPost, and now I'm going to add a div. Okay, now this is a div where our form basically to create a new post will reside. Okay, so I'm going to say ID, and I'm going to call this, I'm going to give it an ID of app over here. I'm going to add div over here, and yeah, I'm going to give this an ID as well. Okay, let us call this as post form. Okay, this is done. Now over here I need a few things. Okay, so I need a input box. Okay, now inside input box, so not inside, actually we need to add few attributes like text. Oops, not tel, it will be text. I'll call this as, I'll give this an ID of post title because this is going to accept the post title. I'll also add a placeholder called post title, and I'm going to mark it as required. Okay, this is done, and I'll duplicate this actually rather than typing in the entire thing, and instead of input I'm going to have a text area over here. Okay, I'll have the, so type is not required actually for text area. I'll just get rid of this. Instead of post title, I'll have post body over here. Placeholder as post body over here, something like this, or post content is better. Okay, and it is required over here. Okay, and I need a closing tag here. Okay, so this is done. I also need to add a button over here. So I'll say button. Okay, and I'll close this, and I'll have an ID over here. So we are going to need an ID for this button because we are going to refer it. Okay, in fact all the elements we need ID because we are going to refer it from the JavaScript, and we are going to get the contents. Right, now if you save this, you're going to have a basic post, basic form over here. Okay, we are seeing some JavaScript here. It's likely we've done some mistake. So I actually just did a refresh and this fixed the issue. Okay, but the button is not coming in properly. So I'll have create post over here. Okay, and I can close this input box as well. Okay, so yeah, it's looking decent now. All right, and now within this app, okay, here, so this is a form div. Okay, here what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a unordered list over here, something like this, unordered list. Okay, I'm going to add an ID of post list, something like this. Okay, so this is where we are going to display all the posts that we fetch. Okay, now here in the end I'm going to have script tag. Okay, I'm going to say src, I'm going to say index.js. I'll save this. Okay, and I also need to link the CSS file, so I can come at the top over here. I can say link rel over here, style sheet. Okay, something like this, and I'll say href and styles.css. Okay, so this is done. Okay, the linking is also done. There is no CSS or JavaScript defined right now, so it's not likely that we'll see any sort of output, but yeah, we will work on this soon. Okay, but for now we're done with the HTML, I believe. There's nothing more to be done over here. Now we can move to index.js. Okay, now here's where our JavaScript code is going to reside, and what all we need to add over here. So let me add a structure over here, and let me give you an overview as to what we are going to do. So first thing, we are going to have some logic that will help us fetch all the posts from the API and display them to the user over here. Okay, because here we have added an unordered list, so this is where our post list is going to be shown. Okay, so first we need to fetch the data. So this fetching is a functionality. Okay, and I'm going to group all the code for fetching all the data into a function. Okay, so this is a function that we are going to have. So I'm going to create this function called fetch post. Then after fetching, we need to display as well. Okay, so displaying meaning we need to render the post on the HTML page, and along with that we also need to add a delete button on the fly for each post. So this we need to build in dynamically. So what we will be doing is we will say delete, sorry, not delete, it will be display post. So this is another function that we are going to create. I'll also need a way wherein user can create the post. So if he enters all the information and if he says create post, the post is created, right? So I'll need a function for that. Okay, so I'll say create post, okay, or create post singular. Okay, so this is what we are going to need. Now when displaying the post, we will be adding or rendering the delete button as well. All right, so the delete button needs to be functional. Okay, so we are going to have a functionality for deleting the post. Okay, it should be triggered when the user clicks on delete button. So these four things is what these four functions is what this file is going to consist of. All right, and we'll go through each of the functionality one by one. All right, step by step. All right, now what I'm going to do is first thing, so I'm going to have a constant over here. Okay, constant. Now why am I creating constant? You will get this shortly, but I'm creating a constant called API URL because I'm going to do multiple API calls, right? Now one way is I hardcode the API URL in every call that I'm doing, or I have a variable created at the top of the file called API URL, and I have the endpoint defined over there. Okay, now the benefit of creating a variable like this is tomorrow if you want to change the URL, you have to just change it at one place. Okay, so you will come over here. I'm going to make use of this endpoint over here. Okay, this is what we are going to make use of. So here you can come, and I'm going to like add this endpoint over here. Okay, something like this. Okay, so what is this? This is the base URL of API. Okay, so I can call it base API URL. Okay, so this is the API URL that we'll use, like I said. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to fetch the post, right? So I'm going to say async. I'm going to create a async function. Okay, function name is fetch post. All right, and I'm going to have all the logic inside. All right, now we'll begin with the try catch block. The reason for this is because we are making an API call, right? Now over here, I'm going to create a response object. I'm going to say await, and I'm going to make use of fetch over here. Okay, I'm going to say API URL over here. Okay, you can even make use of Axios. That's absolutely fine, but I'll stick to fetch over here. You can make use of if over here. I can say if response is not okay. All right, what we do is we throw an error over here. So I'll say throw new error over here, something like this, and I can say error occurred. Data error occurred when fetching data, something like this. All right, so this is how we are throwing the error. All right, and yeah, this is done. Now what we need to do is, if there is no error, I need to create post object over here. I need to get the response, and with the help of await, I need to convert it into JSON over here. Okay, so we have the JSON data now. All right, and then what we can do is we can display the post. Okay, so you can even log it over here. Okay, something like this. Okay, and over here you can show the error. So if there is error, Okay, log the error to console. So you can just say error. This is done. All right. So yeah, this is done. Now what we can do is we need to call this particular function. How do we call it? Okay, so we're going to add an event listener to the entire document because we want to load all the posts once the document is loaded, the HTML document or HTML DOM is loaded. Okay, so I'm going to say document.add event listener. Okay, and over here I'm going to say DOM content loaded. Okay, so you can see it appends an event listener for the events whose okay, this is about add event listener. Okay, but I'm not getting a tooltip for DOM content loaded. So once everything in the DOM is loaded, okay, it is going to trigger this function. I can call fetch post over here, and I'll save this. Now you won't see any output over here, of course, because we are not rendering it to the HTML. But if you go to inspect and if you click on console, so you will see an array. Okay, so this was a huge array. Okay, it took some time to load. Okay, for a while, but yeah, you can see all the data over here. You can see how the data is coming in. You can even log so I don't want to make this very heavy, so I'll just log one post. That is okay. Okay, this means the API is working. All right. Now what we need to do is we don't want to log this onto the console. So I just did this for testing. We actually want to display this to the users. So this is where we are going to make use of display post function over here. Okay, so we need to define this function. So I'm going to say function over here, display post, something like this. Okay, now where are we going to display this? So if you come over to HTML, we need to display it over here in the unordered list, and we need to fetch this ID over here. So I'll come over here, I'll say document dot, I'll say get element by ID, and I'm going to fetch this particular list over here. Okay, so we have got this, and I can say post list over here, something like this. Okay, so I have the list where I wish to display the post. Now first thing is I will clear everything that is there over here. So I can say post list dot inner HTML. I'll clear all the data that exists. Okay, now once this is cleared, okay, so if there is any data loaded previously, that will get cleared using this. Now what you need to do is you have all the data, right? So I need to pass posts over here, all the posts. Okay, so I'll be making a function call to this. But whatever data you are getting over here, what you need to do is you need to iterate through the post. Like you saw, we are getting an array, right? So you can iterate through it, and you can actually create a li element. Okay, because within UI or within UL unordered list, you will have a list of element that is represented using li tag of HTML. So that is what we are going to do. So I'm going to say post dot, I'm going to say for each over here. So something like this, and over here I'm going to, so here what I need to do is I'm going to say post for every post. Okay, for every post you come over here, I'll say document dot get element by ID. Okay, we cannot get element by ID, we need to create element. Okay, so I'll be creating element because we have not defined li in the interface, right? So I'm creating this HTML element, this li tag, and I'll say const li over here, something like this. Okay, so this element is getting created. Now I'll say li dot text content is equal to, okay, I'll add a dollar, and I'll add post dot, and I need to add title over here, something like this. Okay, because we are getting title and I'm getting body as well. Okay, so I'm going to add dollar, and I'll say post dot body, something like this. Okay, and yeah, I think this is it, and let's see what we see over here now. Okay, so we are seeing nothing because we are not calling this function. Okay, so instead of logging over here, I'll just get rid of this. I'm going to say display post. Okay, and we need to pass in all the posts object, like all the posts over here. Now you won't see any log over here, but let me refresh. Okay, you're not seeing anything. 1 second. Okay, you are not seeing anything. So we are not seeing anything because we are creating the element, but we are not appending it to the UI. Okay, so I need to append it to the UI also. So I need to say post list dot append. I can say append child. This will go in as a child, and I'll say li over here. I'll save this, and now you can see, okay, you have all the posts being populated over here, and this is coming in the form of bullets. You can see there's no CSS defined yet. Okay, so that is something you need to keep in mind. Every post is coming in this way. All right, and this is the data. Okay, so yeah, you're seeing everything, all the data. Okay, data might not make sense, but that's okay. You know, this is all dummy data we are working with, but this is good. Now you can add delete button as well, so that the user can click over here and delete the respective post. So what we will do is, before appending over here, okay, before appending like this, I'll have a delete button added. So I'll say const delete button, something like this. I'll say document dot create element. Which is the element? The element is button, something like this. Okay, I'll add a semicolon. Now for button, okay, we need to set some attributes. Okay, so I'll say delete button dot text content. What is the text content? This text content is the property that is going to display the text on the button. So I'm going to say delete. We'll keep it simple. Okay, here I'll say delete button dot class name. I had a class name also over here. I'll call this a delete button. Okay, because this class name I'll be later using in the CSS. Okay, I also need to add an event listener. So I'll say delete a button in short dot on click. So I need to add on click event. Sorry, on click over here. Okay, now on click of this, what you need to do is, we'll have this short function defined. Okay, I'll say delete. Oops. So right now I'll just do console log. We don't have delete post button, delete post function yet. So I'll just do console log. Okay, I'll just log post dot id over here, something like this. So this will give us the ID of the post against which the delete button is clicked. All right, I'll do this and I'll append this to the list. I'll say li dot append. Otherwise we won't see this, right? Like it happened earlier. So I'll just append this, and let us come over here. You can see delete button. Now if you go to inspect console, okay, let us see on click if we see the console log. So if I say click, you're seeing 3. If I click again, you'll see 1, right? So if I click the second post, you'll see 2 over here. So clearly we are able to get the ID of the post that is being clicked. All right, so this delete button is working, except the fact it's not functional yet. We need to define the function yet. Okay, this is done, right? So far what we have done is, if you have to do a quick review, we are fetching the post, we are displaying the post. Okay, displaying means we are rendering the post to the UI. We need to have a create post thing over here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, I'm going to say I'm going to have document dot get element by ID. Okay, why am I doing this? Because create post should be triggered when this create post button is clicked, right? So I'll say document dot get element by ID. I'll add this create post. If a user clicks on this, so if a user clicks, okay, so on click of this, I'll say async. Okay, and I'll have an async function like this created over here. Okay, now it's okay if I don't give a name to this function. No parameters are needed. Okay, I'll add a semicolon, but within the function I'm going to have everything that we need to create a post. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, I'm going to say constant title. Okay, I'll say document dot get element by ID. So this is the entire thing we need. Now we need to get the title, right? So I'll say post title, top post title. Okay, and I'll say dot value here, something like this. Oops. So post title dot value. Okay, this is done. I also need to get the body. So I'll copy this. I'll have this body, and here instead of post title, I'll have body, something like this, and I'll have value. Okay, this is done. So we have title and the body over here. Okay, and now we can do a log. Let us test this. Okay, so I'll say title, comma, body. Okay, if you come here, okay, let me go to inspect, you go to console, let me say test title and test C. I'll create it, and you should see test T and test C. So this is test title and test content. That is what I typed in, and you are seeing that on the console, so it's clearly picking it up, right? So we are getting this over here in title and body. Now what we can do is we need to create a new post object, because we need to send this to the server. All right, so I'm going to create a new post over here, and this is going to be an object over here. So I'm going to say title, I'm going to have body, I'm going to have user ID :1 over here. Okay, so this is the hard-coded user ID just for demonstration. Okay, now this is done. The object creation is done. Now after object creation, what we can do is we need to send this to the server. All right, before sending it to the server, we'll incorporate a try catch block for error handling. All right, within the catch block, I'm going to have the error over here. Okay, something like this. I'm going to have error. Okay, then within the try block, I'm going to say const response, and I'm going to have await fetch. Okay, and I'm going to have the API URL like so, and then I need to add additional things for the post request. Now what are the additional things? I need to specify the method over here. So I'm going to say method, oops, not this one, method. I'm going to say post. So the method request, or the request type, is of post, right? I'm going to say headers. I need to pass in headers. Okay, and I'm going to have content type, and application /JSON over here. Okay, I'll add comma, and we'll add body over here. JSON dot, I'll say stringify. Okay, and I'll convert this into a string like this, new post. Okay, and yeah, this is it. I'll add a semicolon over here. I'll add a if block. So if not response, okay, all right, then probably you can throw a new error. Throw new error. I'll say error when posting post, something like this. Okay, this is done, and we are handling the error as well. Okay, so this is done, and what we need to do is, after, like, if there is no error, then of course we'll come over here. All right, so what we can do is we can have const post is equal to await response dot JSON. So we are getting the response as JSON. Okay, and just to give a confirmation to the user, I'll say alert over here. Okay, and I'll say post created successfully, something like that. Okay, this is done, alert is done, and then I'll refresh the post. Okay, because after creating the data, any new data on the server, you need to refresh the list of posts from the server, right? So I'm calling that function over here. Okay, this is done. I believe we are all set to test this. Let us test. Okay, so I'll say title, I'll say content, I'll say create. You can see post created successfully, and the data is refreshed. Okay, now you won't see the new data being added over here. I'll tell you why. Because it's dummy API, right? It's not like it's saving the data that you're sending to it, but it's giving you a confirmation that the post request has been received, right? And that is why we saw that pop up, because there was no error. The response was okay. All right. So yeah, the post is created, and now let's have the function or the ability to delete the post. So I'm going to have a sync over here, a sync function. I'm going to call this as delete post. And here I'm going to add a couple of parameters like post ID, which will tell us which post we are trying to delete. And I'll also accept the li element over here that we want to remove from the interface. I'll have try catch block over here. Okay, like always, within the catch block, I'll like print the error. Okay, and then over here, I can copy the syntax. In fact, I'll copy this entire thing. Okay, I'll paste it over here. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm saying const response await fetch API URL. Now I'll convert this into a template string. Okay, template literal. So I'll say something like this. Okay, so we need to call the endpoint. If you see this endpoint over here, okay, we'll call the endpoint this endpoint delete post /1. So the one part, this part, the last part is the post ID, and this has to be dynamic. So we need to make use of template literals over here. Okay, so I'll like just add this. Okay, I'll say slash. So this is the endpoint, and I'll say dollar over here. I'll say post ID, something like this. Okay, now method over here is delete, something like this, and you can get rid of all of this. This is not needed, right? This is done. Okay, now if there is no error, we are saying error when deleting post over here. Okay, this is done, and then we can display an alert over here. So alert is this, and we'll fetch the post. So I'll just have the same code. So alert is post deleted successfully. Okay, something like this. Okay, and instead of fetching post, we are accepting this li element, right? So I'll say li element dot remove, something like this. So you can remove the post from the UI as well using this. You are actually deleting that element, that HTML element from the interface. That is what you're doing over here. Okay, so yeah, this is done. Now we need to call delete post. Okay, now when is delete post called? Okay, so if you scroll up here, we were creating the delete button somewhere. So you're creating the post, and then over here post is getting created. Okay, 1 second. So here we are creating the delete button, right? So on click of delete button over here, what we need to do is instead of logging it to the console, we can say delete post, because now we have that function. Okay, I'm going to pass in two parameters like the post ID, post.id over here, like this. Okay, because we have access to the post object here. You can see this is a post object. Okay, post.id, and I can pass in li over here. This is the li element. This is what the li element is. Okay, I'll pass these two, and we are all set, I believe. Let us see the output. Okay, now let me delete the first one. This QUI is the second one. So let me delete this. Post deleted successfully. You can see. So it's working fine. You can see. Absolutely great. You can even add the post over here. Any sort of post. It will work fine. You know. This you can clear if you wish to. Okay, so after creating the post, let's come over here. So when you are creating the post over here, create post title body. Okay, you can come over here, and you can actually get this cleared. So here, if you come to like create post function, you can copy these two. Okay, you're getting these two elements over here, and before just fetching the post, what you can do is I'll get rid of these. Okay, I don't need variables, but it's here in the place of value, you can clear the value fields like this. Okay, so this should clear. You can see test, and I'll put in some content, create post created successfully, and you can see it got cleared. All right, so yeah, this is what it is, and I hope this is looking decent. Now let's beautify this. We can actually add some CSS over here also to make it look a little bit decent. So I'll add body over here. Okay, for body I'll say font family, I can add Arial. Okay, I'll say text align. I'll say center. Margin, I'll keep margin as 0 over here. Padding, let's add some padding over here. We can add padding of 20 pixels. We'll see how this looks. Okay, decent. Okay, we'll improve. Okay, let's go on. Padding and background color, I'll add background color as Alice blue. Okay, or we can add, just keep it simple, white. You can add whatever you want to. Okay, I've just kept white over here. Oops. So yeah, white over here, and this is done. Body, now we can add some styling for header. Let us add some styling. So I'll say color. I have some color code with me. I'll say 333. Oops, hash 333, and we have this header. Okay, after header we need to style this post form. Okay, so I'll come over here to CSS. I'll get the ID like this. Okay, now to this particular form, I'll add a display of flex over here. Okay, and justify content. I'll say center. Okay, align items center over here. I'll say gap of 10 pixels. Okay, and I'll add a margin bottom over here of 20 pixels, like so. Okay, so far so good. Okay, we need to improve more on CSS, so let's add a little bit more. Okay, input, I'll say type. So we'll have type over here, text. Okay, so for this input field, okay, I'll add for text area as well over here. I'll say text area. Okay, like so. I need padding of 10 pixels. Okay. Oops, so this has to be comma over here. Okay, it should work fine. Padding of 10 pixels. Okay, it's looking decent. Now over here, I need to add like width. Width, let's add of 200 pixels. Okay, I'll add margin. Let's keep margin to 0 pixels or 0 over here. I'll say border. Okay, border, I'll add 1 pixels solid, and I'll keep the code to this white. Okay, I'll add border radius over here. I'll add a little bit of radius to 5 pixels. Let's see how that goes. Okay, it's looking decent now, you can see. All right, so yeah, this is about input. You can style more if you wish to, but I think I'll stick to this. Button over here. What is button? We are going to add button padding over here, 10 pixels. I'll add 15 pixels over here. Okay, background color. Background color, we can add you can add blue, for example. Color is white over here. Border of none over here. I'll say radius of 5 pixels. Okay, you can see how it's looking. All right, and then cursor pointer. So we'll add cursor pointer over here, and yeah, this is it. I think cursor will be pointer if you hover, right? So this button, delete button, should be red in color, and we'll come to that. Okay, but this is done right now. Okay, you can have a hover effect as well over here. So I can add a hover effect for button. Okay, and the hover effect is background color of dark blue. Okay, so it will have a hover effect. If you hover, it will turn to dark blue. Okay, this is done. Now we need to style the list, which is actually like the content that we are displaying. Okay, so I'll say list style or list style type, it's called, and I'll stick to none over here. Okay, so we were getting bullets early on. Now we won't get bullets. We have got rid of them. Okay, I'll say padding over here, 0 pixels. Okay, So padding of 0 in short. And I need to style the list over here. So let us add some styling for list. Okay, so I can say padding 10 pixels. Okay, border, I'll say 1 pixels solid. I'll say hash TTT. Okay, this is white color, white shade. Margin of 5 pixels and 0. I'll add border radius of 5 pixels. Okay, I'll add a display of flex over here. Justify content, I'll say space between, and I'll say align items to center. Let us save and let us see. Okay, decent. All right, this is looking good. Okay, we are doing something right now. Okay, it's giving a feel that we are doing something, right? Delete button. Okay, now we need to add some distinct style to delete button. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll get this button style over here. We'll modify this style a bit to match the delete button. So padding, we'll keep a less padding because we're displaying it in a list. I'll keep 5 and 10. Now delete button is a negative, like it's a negative action. So we'll have red over here. Color is white is fine. Border none. Radius 5 pixel. Cursor pointer is fine. So if you come over here, you see it's delete now. But on hover, it's still giving us the blue effect, right? So what I'll do is I'll say dot delete button colon hover over here, and I'll say background color of dark red. You can see this dark red. Now if you come, it will be dark red. You can see, right? So yeah, the app is looking decent now. Okay, and it should work fine. Yeah, you know, we built out one application that helps us learn all the JavaScript concepts, you know, like major JavaScript concepts, functions, working with APIs, you know, interacting with HTML elements, the building dynamic interfaces where you are rendering dynamic things like the list dynamically, right? How you can get the response from the API and iterate through it to render it onto the interface. All these things we have covered, and I hope this has been useful.